let's start here with the quarterback, one Baker Mayfield, the former number one overall pick in the 2018 draft. Now, last week we spoke about how the trade talks were heating up between the Browns and the Carolina Panthers. But as of this week, Josina Anderson over at CBS Sports has reported that the Seattle Seahawks have a little bit of interest in Baker Mayfield. Are you hearing the same? And what do you make of probably a Mayfield, or possibly, I should say, a Mayfield to the Pacific Northwest sort of venture here for this season?
The one thing I was fortunate enough to learn from Al Davis is to never look linear on some report, right? So you never say, okay, this person has reported this, and then the next step is that. There's always a motivation and always try to peel back the layers. And Josina has a lot of sources, and she's really wired in the Cleveland organization as she breaks stuff in there most of the time. Rarely does she have an influence in Seattle. One of the things you do in the league is who talks to who. Like a reporter breaks news from Tennessee. Okay, that reporter has somebody in the building. You kind of can figure it out. Somebody breaks news in New England. They have somebody in the building. They figure it out. The guys that have the most, the Schefters, the Rappaport, they kind of have somebody in all the buildings and in the league offices. But when you get some of these other ones, you got to go back and peel back the layer. So to me, what I think's happening is I think this is an opportunity where the Browns are wanting to finalize this deal with Carolina, and there's kind of a gridlock. I think the Browns and Carolina have reached some conclusion on where it's going. Again, this is about money, as the great Johnny Sack said. Again with the money, right? So, what are they trying to do with Baker? What's going on? And I think what this report is to send a message to the Panthers, hey, it's now, let's get this done quickly. Do I think Seattle's in it? No, I really don't. I mean, John Snyder loved Drew Lock coming out. Like, what has changed between now and the OTAs to make Seattle into it? It just does. It seems more like a ploy by the Browns to try to get some interest, and we'll see if that holds up. And I think it behooves the Panthers to try to close the gap as quickly as they can if they want to do that. Whatever the gap is, whether the gap's between Mayfield and incentives or Mayfield and the contract, I don't think the gap is between the Browns and the Panthers. I think that's pretty much worked out. I think this is about the Panthers and Mayfield.
That's interesting because it almost, to me, it feels like you think that Carolina would be more eager to get this thing done in the sense that they want to get their quarterback in. Now, minicamp is gone, so they can't get those minicamp reps back. They can only get him in now for training camp. Does it surprise you that the Carolina is just, I mean, I guess this is just kind of the negotiation, how things work out, of a game of chicken of, okay, we'll wait as long as possible to see if you budge or if we budge type of thing. But it's almost a little surprising to me that Carolina would not necessarily risk this because we heard that Seattle's not really interested, but maybe at the right price, the Seahawks might be interested in Baker Mayfield.
Well, I mean, look, I think what Carolina's doing is doing what you should do, is you say, who's our competition in this, right? And Carolina's general manager, Scott Federer, he was in the Seattle organization for how many years? Okay, so if anybody knows John Schneider and Pete Carroll, he does. And I'm sure he has sources that he talks to in that building. And, I think he can determine really accurately what's their level of interest. And look, their owner is a guy who's is revered, not just respected, revered in the hedge fund industry. And he makes a living negotiating. I mean, that's what he's done, and that's what his expertise are. So I'm sure he's sitting there saying, why should I pay more when I don't have to pay more? I mean, all of us, when we talk about rich people, we think that just give the money. The reason they became rich is because they protect every dollar. They understand the value of the dollar, and they understand winning the negotiation. I think sometimes it's more about winning the negotiation than the money when you reach this level of wealth. So I think it's all about information, right? I think the most important thing when you're dealing in a negotiation, or us on a betting network, is to have the best information. I was in Key West and last week, but when I started the pod last week, I just came back from the Harry Truman Little White House Museum there. And it reminded me of a great story I wrote about in the book coming up about Jimmy the Greek, right? So Jimmy the Greek is this young kid in Steubenville, Ohio. And he's got and he's a gambler. I mean, the whole city of Steubenville is gambling. There's all sorts of places all over the town that they have bookies in it, right? And it's kind of accepted. And in fact, Jimmy the Greek once said, "I didn't know gambling was illegal until I got to about 26 years old," because that's the world he lived in. So he's a young kid, and he grows a mustache. And his sister says to him, "That's ridiculous. You look ridiculous, and no women like men with mustaches." And so he kind of ponders that for a while, and he thinks about it, and he sees Thomas Dewey running for president against Harry Truman. And Dewey has a mustache. So he kind of thinks, okay, I can bet this and see what I can come up with. And so he takes two women, hires them, puts them in the Steubenville grocery store, and says, ask every woman who comes in this grocery store if they like men with mustaches. Overwhelmingly, the verdict comes back. They don't like men with mustaches. So the Greek takes his 10 grand that he has saved up, and he bets it on 17-1 on Harry Truman. And he wins, and he becomes Jimmy the Greek. He becomes a legend because he had information that he used in the right way. And that's the moral of the story is, I have this information. What am I going to do with it? And I think that's what Carolina is stuck with right there. They have the information, and Josina's not doing anything. I'm not saying her report's false. I'm just saying that I think it's more of about trying to motivate Carolina to get the deal done than it is actually anything else.
Yeah, and we see that happen often in the NFL and in sports in general, that something from the organization gets leaked out to a reporter to kind of influence what the other team may or may not end up doing there. And that's part of trying to expedite these processes and hoping to get things done. Let's say, though, if Baker were to go to Seattle, how do you think he would fit in that offense there with what the Seahawks got going on?
Well, I mean, look, what Seattle has done is they went to the Rams offense, partly because that's what Wilson wanted to run. Mm-hmm. And so what is the Rams offense? What is the Rams offense with Goff? And it became different with Stafford a little bit, but not much. The Rams offense is play action pass, bootlegs, nakeds, move the quarterback, run the outside zone. I mean, that's kind of what Seattle wanted to be last year. So it does fit. He would fit perfectly into what they're doing. It's no different than the Kevin Stefanski offense, which is a derivative of Gary Kubiak, which is a derivative of Mike Shanahan, which is a derivative of, all that kind of ties together. That's why when you study football and you're preparing to play a team, you have to study the origins of the defense, how it became ineffective, how it adapted over time. Offensively, where did this start? What are the technique? What are they doing? This isn't about watching the last 3 games. This is about studying the complexities and how this was formed. And that allows you to either defend it better or attack it better. And I think when you're a quarterback like Baker, this gives you an opportunity. Now, what would he be like in Carolina? I think Carolina would be smart to handle the same thing. I mean, Carolina's going to be a spread team out of 11, whether it's in shotgun or out of under center. And they've got a great outside zone runner in McCaffrey. I think it would fit there too.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. I think both teams would be competitive adding Baker Mayfield to their roster there. When that happens, we don't know, but you believe it should likely go to the Carolina Panthers, who maybe they get a little bit more interesting in that NFC South.
I think the Panthers have to give a kind of I think Baker has to make a decision, right? So Baker's sitting there, and he knows he's got this guaranteed money, and he knows that Cleveland's going to pay some of it. I think Cleveland's going to pay some of it, not all of it. I think there's probably a little bit of the disconnect is probably, let's say it's $4 million, right? Mm-hmm. Carolina wants to pay X, Cleveland wants to pay Y, and that number doesn't quite get to $18 million. And so there's the debate. To me, if I were Baker's agent, I would say, Baker, look, we have an opportunity. This $3 million, we can get it in incentives. Let's take this deal. It's easy for me to say because it's not my money.
I was gonna say.
Again with the money, right? Yeah. And so I have to position myself to get in a better place next year. Mm-hmm. And where can I do that? Where can that fit? Because if I take this money and put it in incentives, and I go to Carolina and I get them to the playoffs, they're probably going to re-sign me at a pretty good deal. I'll make that money up. I mean, if you're Carolina, you say, okay, you take this deal, we'll put it in incentives. If you go to the playoffs, we'll give it back to you, or we will we will obviously have to franchise you, and you'll make even more money. So there's a way to get it done. It just takes some doing to do it. And I think ultimately, that's why I get the sense it will happen.
Thanks for watching the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi. And for more videos like this, make sure to subscribe to VSiN Live and the GM Shuffle podcast with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN, wherever you get your podcasts.